Welcome back to the meeting after the meeting, everyone. We're your hosts, David O.
And Eric V.
Today we are rejoined again by our amazing, lovely, gracious guest, Jexi. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely.
We love having you on. I don't think we need to go into all this, Jexi's this is like her 5th time being on. We don't have to go into the whole, maybe we can do like a different question, maybe we don't have to go into like the other stuff. We can just go into like, maybe a different question this time, David.
I was gonna do it like a lightning round style.
Lightning? See,
But
I mean, is that?
I asked Jexi the question and she answers as fast as possible.
Go ahead. I mean, go ahead.
Okay.
Sure. Fine.
Jexi, where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
When were you first introduced to recovery?
My clean date is November 6, 2012, but I grew up in the rooms because my mother was in the program.
Boom, you answered 2 questions in 1. We're done. All right, so with all that out of the way, we will be doing Tradition 6 this evening, and I will turn it over to Jexi to explain what that is and give us her experience.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jexi. I'm an addict. I'm really excited that you guys asked me to come on to talk about Tradition 6. I absolutely love the traditions. So often I feel they are the most overlooked, fun topic of conversation in Narcotics Anonymous, so I'm always so excited to talk about them. So I guess before we start talking about Tradition 6, I should read it. So Tradition 6 says, an NA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the NA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, or prestige divert us from our primary purpose. So that's something that we read at every meeting, right? But I doubt most people have stopped to think about like what that actually means. So, the very last thing it says is divert us from our primary purpose. So what's our primary purpose? To carry the message to the addict who still suffers, right? So when it talks about, obviously in the basic text you can go through what it says, but when it talks about endorsing, right, it says 3 things: endorse, finance, or lend the NA name. So let's break that down real quick, just so before I give my spiel, you guys know exactly what these words mean. So endorse is saying that we think that what somebody's doing is good, right? Like you can endorse a candidate by saying you're going to vote for them. You can, any saying that any organization that you stand behind it is endorsing, right? Simple as that. Finance is giving a place money or taking money, right? Depending on how it's being looked at. But in Tradition 6, it says we ought never finance, which means us giving money to an organization, right? And then the third thing, it says lend the NA name, which essentially just letting somebody say, use the words Narcotics Anonymous, right? To any related facility or outside enterprise. So related facility could, most people, again, don't think about what these words mean. Related facility could be a, let's say, like a clubhouse where a bunch of meetings are held, right? A related facility, just a place where we have our meetings. That's a facility that's related to us. Or an outside enterprise, which would be an organization, right? So forgetting the rest of it, the problems of money, property, or prestige, we can focus on that. But I think understanding what all those words mean is important for the conversation. So now that we kind of broke down what that means, I'll tell you my thoughts on it. So one of the things that has come up so much over the last few years is the huge prevalence of rehab centers. And a lot of rehab centers use the 12 steps as a basis for their own programs. Why do they do that? Because the 12 steps in general and the peer-to-peer support model of 12-step programs has been something that has been statistically shown to be successful. Now, it doesn't have super amazing success rates like, other recovery avenues may, but it's one of the most studied ways of recovery, right? There's been so many studies done on the 12-step model, on the peer-to-peer model, and there is a level of success in that. So rehabs like using that model because it's something that they know already works. All the guidelines are written out for them. But the problem doesn't come when rehabs want to use a 12-step program. The problem comes when rehabs want to use the 12 Steps Narcotics Anonymous program. Because when rehabs say, hey, we use Narcotics Anonymous, 12 steps. That implies that our organization is somehow related to that facility, right? Now, let's say that facility also does something like prescribe maintenance medication. Something as simple as that, right? Like what a lot of rehab centers do, even any medication, right? Doesn't even have to be specifically maintenance medication. Let's say they give out sleep medication or blood pressure medication, right? Doesn't matter. But by putting Narcotics Anonymous together with medical practices, it gets confusing, right? Because from a Narcotics Anonymous standpoint, anything medical is an outside issue, right? Like we don't talk about that. And so by combining those things into one place, it prevents us from our primary purpose, which is delivering a clear Narcotics Anonymous message, which is simply that any addict, can lose the desire to use and find a new way of life, right? So a lot of times, the other thing is like with rehab centers with endorsing them, right? By using our name or by any of us as members or as a group or as a program saying that we think this one particular rehab center is a good idea, we're now saying, like, by us putting our name on another organization, if they fail, if they do something shady, if people start relapsing after being there, right, anything, it can look really bad on our organization, right? Also, when it talks about, money, property, or prestige, right, would be very easy for us as an organization to take money from rehab centers and allow them to use our name. But by doing that's why Tradition 6 comes before Tradition 7, because Tradition 7 is about being fully self-supporting, and they kind of go hand in hand. Because when we lend our name or we give money to a facility or we stand up and say that any facility is a good idea, it really can muddle the waters of the Narcotics Anonymous message, right? Which is one addict helping another. Facilities have doctors and counselors and psychiatrists, right? And that's not our message. We don't say those things are bad. We just say that those things aren't us. The other thing that it says specifically in the chapter is it talks about places like clubhouses. There's a lot of clubhouses that are specifically recovery-based, right? You see them with AA and you see them with NA, and sometimes both, right? Sometimes there's a clubhouse that allows any 12-step meeting to meet there. All groups pay rent to the facility, and the facility is open for all the meetings. But a lot of people get confused that just because a meeting happens at a clubhouse means that clubhouse is part of Narcotics Anonymous. And it's really important in our traditions that those things are separate. If you don't have a separation, then it seems like let's say a clubhouse has, multiple NA meetings, and it's only NA. Let's say they're not AA2, and, because we can see how that can get confusing. But even if it's just NA meetings, all happening at one place, if we don't distinguish that the meetings are separate from the building, right, a lot of issues can happen. First off, not every meeting in that place is the same meeting, usually.
Yeah.
Right? It's a bunch of different groups. And each group is fully autonomous. Each group runs things their own way. They have their own way of doing things, and they have their own way of delivering a message. And when it gets confusing with a building, it's people don't understand. Like if you just show up to that building and talk that it's not NA. And you see that happen a lot with clubhouses. And in fact, I've heard some people passionately say that clubhouses in Narcotics Anonymous are like a no. I've seen people really go hard against facilities like that. Personally, I think any place you can get a meeting is a good idea. But
why do you think people are like? Go ahead. Because
of that distinction with there not being a clear line between the building and the meeting. Right? So often people go to the clubhouse because it's an NA clubhouse, right? But it's each meeting is its own thing. We don't have like an NA hangout, right? Like we don't have an NA like hotel or an NA clean living, right? We don't do that. We just have meetings. And so when you have a building that may offer these other things as well, it gets confusing that those other things aren't part of NA. We see it actually now, too, with meetings moving online. My local area uses Discord, which is a server that most gamers were using. That's kind of how it came out. And so the server that my home group meets on has 6 or 7 other meetings that meet. We tried to get a bunch to meet in the same place. And so we had to explain to people who were new to the technology that the chat within the server was not NA. They're just members chatting like you would before or after a meeting. That only while in the actual meeting room are you part of an NA meeting, right? And we had to make that distinction because, just as you would with any other chat room, people post about whatever, they share a meme, they, tell a story, whatever they're going to do. And we had to make it very clear to whoever is coming in that those chats and those communications people having aren't within the realm of the meeting, right? Like those are just people talking. So the server itself wasn't NA. And that's how we made sure we weren't violating traditions. I used to go to a meeting when I was in Maryland that took place there was like a homeless shelter. It was in a very rural area, so it was a very small homeless shelter, mostly for women and kids. And they wanted to make NA meetings available for the people that were there because none of them could drive, none of them had transportation, and we were in a rural area. And so we had a couple of us had gotten together and we talked with the police and we said, like, look, we can hold a meeting here, but here's some clear distinctions we have to make. We have to make sure that people know that we are not part of your facility. We want the group collections to pay rent, right? Like we want to be able to pay you rent to rent out the space essentially. And we have to make sure that you cannot ask us what people who come in say. We can't report to you who shows up, right? Like we went through all of these different things with the facility and they were like, look, we'll follow whatever guidelines you put out. We just want to make sure there's a meeting available to those who need it. And we have the space to offer, right? But I've also seen that same thing become a problem, right? Where a place says, we want to have a meeting available. There was a church. I think I've talked to you guys about this before, but there was a church and they said, we want to have an NA meeting available for our congregation. And sure, of course, we'll rent out the space. We can do that. But they wanted to make sure that they had some sort of say. They didn't want the word higher power. They wanted the words Jesus Christ used, right? And these changes that to them were no big deal, but to the program was a big problem, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And because of that, we ended up having to, we had to tell them we couldn't do it after some time because they wanted to be able to tell their congregation and put it out in all their flyers that their church had Narcotics Anonymous, but they would only do it if their church had some sort of say in the program, right? So we had to disallow that. We said, you can't do that. You can't promote that your church is offering Narcotics Anonymous services as if it's part of part of you, right? Like we're a separate thing. You can say that you have meetings available here. That's fine, but they were trying to almost promote it, right? Which also violated our traditions. And so you don't really see why traditions are important until we have problems. And when the waters get muddied, when the message isn't clear, then we have a real problem. And it can cause people to go out and use. I mean, I think about the first couple of times I was at meetings and I heard the word God. And I hated it, right? Like I hated NA talking about God. I didn't want to have anything to do with God. I wasn't really a religious person. I didn't understand it. But, someone was able to explain to me that we use the word God because a higher power of your understanding, something that's loving and caring and greater than yourself, like that gets real wordy. Saying God is something that people just generally understand the concept of, but we don't mean a Judeo-Christian God, right?
I actually literally just wrote down this semi-controversial question. It's like, do you find the word God is an inadvertent endorsement of like Judeo-Christian religions?
And I would say no, only because our literature explains really, really clearly that that's not what we mean. Like if we didn't have that clarified, then I'd say, yeah, I do think it's a problem. I think when I talk about my higher power, I use the word higher power. I never use the word God. And I do that for a reason. But can you imagine going to a meeting and having people use Jesus Christ instead of the word God, instead of the word higher power?
That's very, very specific, yes.
Right. You'd walk in and you'd be like, what is this? I'm not, this is some religious thing. I don't want any part of it. Now, there are programs that use the 12 steps that do that, right? Like Celebrate Recovery is a religious 12-step program. And they work very well, but that's part of their premise, right? That's their message. But that's not Narcotics Anonymous' message. Our message is we're spiritual, not religious program. So we have to be so careful about where we give money. Like this tradition is about us giving money. The 7 tradition is about us taking money, right? So you can see how they kind of go hand in hand. But it's also, as you said, it's giving out our name. Like our name means something to people. People understand what Narcotics Anonymous means and the success that it's had. Again, the statistics for addiction recovery aren't great anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But 12-step recovery has shown to have some success. And right now, being shown to have some success is a big deal. And places want to use our name for that. Now, there is nothing wrong with a place using the 12 steps as a basis for their own programs, right? Like, that's fine. They can do that. They can even say they took it from our stuff, right? Like, that's on them. But if they promote their institution using our name, it implies an endorsement. It implies, and that endorsement could lead somebody to choose that place over another place. And which they could be, some terrible place. We've all heard horror stories about addiction. And it's the same reason NA doesn't have recovery houses, right? Like we don't endorse any of the recovery house communities. There are plenty of really good ones. Right? There are plenty of reputable recovery houses out there that are nationwide that have great success, right? But NA doesn't endorse any of them.
Yeah.
It's important that we remain separate. And it also goes with anonymity, right? It says the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, right? That's anonymity for all of them, right? And that's another reason is because if we were to endorse, if we were to have these kinds of relationships, we could not be anonymous because you would have to, when you're signing contracts, when you're giving this kind of stuff, you have to give your full name. You have to be a representative of the program to be able to even do that. And we don't have representatives. We don't use our full names. So that in itself is why, we remind people about anonymity. It's not just so people don't know you go to meetings. It goes to so much more than that. It's really important. You'll see, when people come and bring, H&I, for example, when they bring a meeting into a facility, one of the things they almost always say in their script when they're talking to the people there is, we are not affiliated with this facility. We are an outside organization coming in to give you information about Narcotics Anonymous, but we have no false opinions or anything with this facility. And they almost always say that, at least every H&I thing that I've been to. And it's for the protection of the organization. I mean, you can imagine the disaster that would happen if we started giving out permission for any organization to use our name.
Yeah.
And if people, I mean, look, some rehabs are get sued because most of their patients die, right? Can you imagine if, they paid us enough money where we're like, you can use our name, and then, if it would make our message mean nothing. And I think, too, again, it goes back to one addict helping another addict. It's more like the difference between, a grassroots organization and a corporate funded one. We are just people helping people. We don't have any of these ties to other organizations. We don't have to give opinions, right? Every person's opinion in Narcotics Anonymous is going to be different. But if we all follow the same traditions, the same guidelines, we can ensure that our message is consistent, right? Like our opinions may be different, but our message is consistent. And I think that that's something that we have that a lot of other places don't have, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to look, you know, it says in the book, like people are easily confused by what is NA and what are related facilities. You know, especially because it says like recovery houses have been started and staffed by NA members. So having to make that you know, differentiate between the two is really important, because a lot of us, when we get clean, get involved in helping others in recovery in a greater way. I mean, I can't even tell you the amount of people I know who work at recovery houses or rehabs or, you know, want to hold meetings in their sober living or whatever, you know. And it's always important to differentiate the program from the people. Right? Just because a person in NA starts a recovery house doesn't mean that recovery house is NA. Right? Just because someone, a rehab, employs all Narcotics Anonymous members doesn't mean that rehab is being endorsed by Narcotics Anonymous. Like, those are different things. And that's why I think, personally, that we push the steps so much for people, right? We always say the steps, the steps, the steps. And I think that the traditions are not just as important, but can be even more important when it comes to anything recovery related outside yourself, right? Like the steps are about me, right? The steps are how I get right with myself. The traditions are how I live outside of me, you know, like how I live out in the community, how I interact with other people, how I represent myself. You know, one of the things that we tell people all the time is like, if you're at a convention or at any event where there's a lot of members, a lot of Narcotics Anonymous members, we remind people regularly that their behavior is a direct reflection of the program, right? If you get in a fight at the hotel where the convention was at, that makes Narcotics Anonymous look bad. You know, you start running around like a fool, like leave your cigarette butts all over the ground, that makes Narcotics Anonymous look bad. But what I also have seen is we were in my old area in Southern Maryland used to have a retreat in the fall, like a camping trip on a campground that was like, I think it was like a summer camp, but we used it in the fall. And we ran everything and we cleaned everything, and we served meals and we cooked the meals and we cleaned up after. And there was a couple of staff members there, and there was a woman in the kitchen who supervised the kitchen while we were using it. And she's like, you know, I hate to ask, but what organization are you? And I said, we're a recovery organization. And she goes, I know you're not supposed to tell me, but what is it? Because you guys are amazing. I've never seen so many people so conscientious about you know, because we cleaned up after everything, right? We left that place better than we found it. And the woman knew somebody, her son, who was struggling with addiction. And she was so impressed by the way that we carried ourselves as a whole in that facility that she wanted to tell our son about it because maybe we could help him. And you see how it's not just about how we look to people as a whole, but how we look to individual people. Our name is important. Narcotics Anonymous means something to people. And when we muddy those waters, we're risking people's lives, not just because of our organization, people don't know, but as it says, it mixes up our message. It muddies the waters. And our message is a life-saving one. We don't carry the message because we want people to, like, get happy, right? Like, we carry our message because we want to save people's lives. I don't know. I'm just very passionate about all the traditions. I hope any of that made sense.
Oh, it all made great sense.
Definitely. I do.
Eric, since I interrupted with my first question, so you go ahead.
Okay. No, I like how passionate you are about the traditions. The traditions are very cool.
Love it.
Like, I don't feel like they're talked about as much as they should be. But actually, this is the first tradition I ever chaired for a meeting doing is Tradition 6. And fun fact, David, the meeting place that you and I go to actually violates Tradition 6.
Do they?
Yeah.
Is it with the bulletin board?
It's with the bulletin board. It is with the bulletin board.
Yeah.
So they have like a bulletin board at this church which has like a bunch of different fellowships and which night they meet. And it kind of, it's not like a format.
It's not a major.
It's more of the way it's formatted. Rather, if it was schedule based, I think I'd be more okay with it. But it's more like, it seems more promotional on the part of the church.
Because where the midnight meeting is held, they strictly have a schedule.
Yes, they strictly have like Excel spreadsheet style schedule.
Yes.
And that, I mean, that I can kind of get behind because that's like, I don't know, like, you don't want the people who are going to Nicotine Anonymous to necessarily be out, like, coming in while an NA meeting's happening. So,
or get triggered.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just, like all the cigarette smoke. My God. So.
Well, I think it's also for anonymity, right? Because one of the things is that we don't put signs outside our meetings generally that are like, hey, you're a drug addict, come here, you're in the right place, right? Like,
it's true.
To keep anonymity, we want people to feel safe coming in and out of our meetings without them worrying that people know what meeting they're going into, right? Like, so when you have a schedule posted in a public place, you know, even if it's just a schedule, sometimes that in itself can make people feel uncomfortable because it's like, oh, so anybody who walks by here at 8 o'clock is going to know that I'm a drug addict. You know,
it's kind of weird. Like it's hard to describe. I would say it's like a semi-public place because it's used as like a community center. So it's not necessarily just a clubhouse.
Oh, yeah, that place is weird,
community center.
Because that place isn't the Alano Club.
Yeah.
The Alano Club is like a clubhouse. But
yes, that's a clubhouse. But the place we're talking about, it's a community center. So, like, they have lots of different meetings there. Like, they even have, like...
They have a pool there.
Group meetings there. Yeah. Well, that's different. That's not affiliated.
It's part of their... It's like right next to their building.
Yeah, that just happens to be the geography of the area. They're not affiliated in any way whatsoever.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they don't know. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I grew up in Columbia. I know.
So I guess here's my question: since we're in the clubhouse arena, what's your opinion on clubhouses, Jexi? Because, I mean, the one that we're talking about right now, which I'm just going to say it, it's called the Serenity Center. The Serenity Center has a bunch of different meetings, a bunch of different fellowships, and, like, one of the ways...
But it's not fellowship exclusive.
It's not fellowship exclusive, where the Alano Club is fellowship exclusive.
Yes.
Though I do like that they play wiffle ball after their midnight meeting. I think that's very cool. I'm way too old for that now, but I think it's a very cool thing that they do. But it goes back to your thing where you're talking about earlier, where it's like, now I think wiffle ball at 1 o'clock in the morning is part of AA. So, like, what is your opinion on them from a fellowship perspective? Because there is a good fellowship part of clubhouses. They bring, because people can hang out, you know, like you don't necessarily, the meeting after the meeting is a little bit longer. So, I mean, they might not fall in line completely with Tradition 6, but, like, how do you feel about them from a fellowship perspective? From, like, the actual fellowship. Like, the fellowship.
From a fellowship perspective, I think they're fantastic. Right. I think when it comes to having a safe place to meet with others in recovery and do fun things, especially even just hanging out when it's not a meeting, I think they're great. And I think that they can still fit in with Tradition 6, right? Like even in the reading of Tradition 6, sorry, somebody keeps blowing up my phone. Even in the reading of Tradition 6, it mentions that they exist. And it doesn't specifically say that there's a bad point, right? Like that they're bad. I think that because they're so good for the fellowship, for fellowshipping, and for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, when we're talking about fellowshipping, we're talking about people hanging out with other people, right? Like the the getting to know other people in the program, the having friends, hanging out, right? Like that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. And I think having a place that is a safe, a fun place to do that is really good, because so often when we first get into recovery, we're missing that. We're missing the fun. We're missing the connection. We're missing the friends. We're missing the talking, right? Like we haven't done any of that in active addiction for so long a lot of the time. So getting to do that in a safe place can also keep us sane. When you're going nuts at home and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't be by myself anymore, and you have a place that you can just go and there's somebody else there, that's always going to be helpful. I think that what's important when it comes to any sort of clubhouse, or, especially when it's like multi-fellowship, or even if it's just NA, right? I think it's really important that there are at least some, let's say, a sign up, some type of verbiage that just clarifies for people the difference between the clubhouse and the meeting, right? Like the fellowshipping and the program. That they're two separate things. I think as long as that's made clear, and there's not even a tradition violation. I just think when that's not made clear and newcomers don't understand that they're two separate things, that it kind of has a problem. But for fellowshipping reasons, I think they're great. And I wish there was more like places for addicts to hang out together.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's now that you said that, like, that just brought up a question. What do you think about the sober bars that have sort of like started to pop up around the country? What do you think about that?
I haven't heard of that. Please elaborate.
They're super cool, in my opinion, but go ahead, David.
So for anybody who's listening, sober bars are places where it's very much like a bar scene. It has the stereotypical bar, and they mocktails that you can get, Shirley Temples and all non-alcoholic drinks. But for all intents and purposes, it is a bar scene. It's like 18 and above or 21 and above. They have like live bands, stuff like that, like stand-up comedy. It's very much a normal bar, but there's just no alcohol. So they have cocktails, like they have energy drinks, stuff like that, and it's trying to basically create a safe bar / environment for the sober community.
Wow, I've never heard that. I think that's amazing. I'll tell you the one problem with it, but I think that's incredible. So I'm going to give you my pros and cons kind of thing, right? So the reason I think that's awesome is because the hardest thing when you get clean is your lack of ability to go places and hang out with people and do things that normal people do, right?
Yep.
I've been in recovery for a while now, and one of my good friends who I've known since I've been like 14, every year he celebrates his birthday at a bar. And I get invited every year, and they know I'm in recovery. They know I don't drink, right? But I have like 3 friends that I've known since I've been little, and we're still friends. So when the one guy celebrates his birthday, they all go out. So the only time of year that I ever go into a bar is for his birthday, because they know I don't drink. I walk in, they have a cup of Coke ready for me. I can dance around, I can have fun, and I also tend to leave pretty early, right? Like once people start getting drunk, I'm out. But I miss that, right? Like I miss the sitting around and just chatting, or like I used to be a big fan of watching UFC, right, on pay-per-view. And I used to love going to bars and watching the fights, right? But like now it's like it's not so fun, because every time if I go to do that, everybody around me is drinking. Now bars are not necessarily a trigger for me. Like I don't necessarily feel like I have to drink when I'm there, but it would be so much more fun to go to that kind of environment and have there be no alcohol, right? I think it's great. The negative is I think with anything, it's important to know what your triggers are. Going into a bar for some people is just not going to work, right? Whether there's alcohol there or not, that scene, that music, the smells, whatever may be enough to cause somebody to leave that sober bar and go and drink, right? So I think it's important. Like for me, my triggers were not bars. My trigger was my bathroom and rolled up dollar bills and, and credit cards. Like those are my triggers. Like 3:00 in the afternoon was my biggest trigger. It wasn't. So I think that if you need to, before you would go to a place like that, it's important to be honest with yourself and important to have an escape plan. That's what I call them. Whenever I go to that one time a year, I go to the bar with my friends. They know I have a backup plan. I have somebody that I check in with just to let them know I'm good, when I'm going, when I'm leaving. As soon as I say I'm leaving, my friends have never asked me to stay. They know if I say I'm leaving, that I'm leaving, and they walk me out. I have this all set up because I know I'm going into a place that's high risk. So I think you would still have to treat this bar scene, even if there's no alcohol, as a high-risk environment until you knew how you responded to it.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, Eric, what you got?
This is such a hard tradition. You speak so eloquently on it, though, Jexi. I'm trying to think.
I know. I had to scratch out like two of my questions that you answered while you were talking. I was like, damn it. So comprehensive.
Aww.
So
you guys are so sweet to me.
Honestly, and I didn't picture you as a UFC
No, that threw me.
Lady.
Yeah, that definitely threw me. Did you watch?
Really?
Did you watch the fight last night?
No, to be honest, it's been since I've left my marriage 2.5 years ago. I've only watched one UFC match. I'm so missing it because my ex-husband used to order them on pay-per-view all the time. I watched all the undercards. I was super passionate, and I got really into it, and I loved it. But then when I left, it was kind of like nobody in my house watches it, so ordering it on pay-per-view isn't a thing, and so I stopped kind of keeping up with it. And I know they've been showing them on ESPN, and I really want to get back into watching it, but I don't know that I feel like I've fallen so far out of it. I don't even know who to root for anymore. I don't know.
Well, those guys have such short careers. You can just jump right back in.
That's true. I do want to start watching again. I'll tell you this. I loved it. You know why I liked it? I don't necessarily like fighting, right? I'm a lover, not a fighter. I'm not. It's not like the physical violence or anything. I love how unique every person is. So every person, when they fight, they have their own style, right? Everybody's good at different things. And I love seeing how one person, let's say, could be really good at boxing, right? They're good with their fists. While somebody else is really good at jiu-jitsu. And seeing how their strengths and weaknesses play against each other and see who comes out on top. I love that. I think that's so fun because you have a lot of people who are well-rounded, but it reminds me so much of real life, right? Not everybody, even your most well-rounded person, has strengths and weaknesses. And seeing how those strengths and weaknesses play against other people's strengths and weaknesses, I just find it fascinating.
That is the sweetest assessment of the UFC ever. Me, totally. I'm just I want to see somebody get their face smashed in. That's what I want to see. I just want to see knockouts, blood, tap outs. That's what I want to see. And you're talking about the character and integrity of every fighter. And I'm I didn't think that at all. Did you quick question. Did you have a favorite fighter?
I don't even remember her name, but the it's slipping my mind right now, but the girl who beat Ronda Rousey. The girl who took the title from Ronda Rousey.
Holly Holm.
Yeah.
Holly Holm.
Yeah. I loved her. I liked her because it was so different. And then there was another female, I think, who beat Holly, who she had the best.
Nunez?
Yes. Nunez.
Yeah, she just fought last night. Yep.
Did she? See,
Yeah.
I would have watched it, but you know why I liked her? She had that true underdog story, right? She worked 100%. Herself up all the way and then took something that she really, really wanted and she fought hard for it. And it was look, we see that in real life. It's so much like recovery to me, right? The harder you work, the harder you fight for something, the more, the greater the wins are. Right? If everything's handed to you, if your recovery is really easy, then how it's almost it's hard to appreciate, right? But if you have to fight every day to stay clean at the beginning, when you get 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, it feels good. And you're less likely to relapse because it's the people, from my experience, and it's not all the time, But the people who had an easy 90 days, who didn't really struggle, are more likely to repeat it because they didn't have that same like desperation, you know?
Yeah.
I love seeing people kind of like rise from the ashes thing, you know, like work for it. You know, like think about the best speakers you hear in NA. They're the ones who are like, had a hard recovery. I don't care about how hard your active addiction was, right? Like we all have active addiction's hard no matter what, right? But people who had a really hard recovery and didn't use, like to me, I'm like, that's incredible. Like I've heard some awful stories from people, and it's amazing to me when it ends with I didn't use. To me, like I don't know, like I love that. I love that fighter mentality, you know, like it's the heart, you know, like the heart of the fighter.
Absolutely. And before I turn it back over to you, Eric, I have to say, because of the sixth tradition, NA is not affiliated with UFC at all. We're not endorsing UFC, side fighting, none of it. Not WWE, no. There's no affiliation at all. That's it. Okay, Eric.
No, this is not a commercial.
No.
So, like, you kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, and I actually mentioned it the other night when we were talking about, because I brought the Guiding Principles book, which is not next anymore on my list to read. It's going to be after, what is this book? It's going to be after this other book. But how do you go about working this tradition outside of the fellowship?
That is a good question. Well, I think, I don't know, if I'm just talking off the fly, right? I think that, you know, when it talks about endorsing, you know, financing or doing anything that's outside of what we believe in, right? So, you know, when silly things like when I give to charity, right? I don't give to the charities that are popular. I don't give to the charities that, like, you know, my friends give to, right? Like I give to the ones that matter to me, the ones that I feel represent what I'm feeling. When I'm posting stuff online, when I'm posting things, you know, both on my personal stuff and on my Jexi stuff is all attached to my YouTube channel, right? And then I have like private personal stuff also. But when I post on any of those things, I always make sure that anything I share, anything I post is a reflection of who I am. I don't ever share somebody's stuff that goes against what I believe is okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I make sure that my word, like I know my words matter, and the internet especially is forever. So I'm not going to say something or interact with people or pick fights with people if I know that it's going to reflect badly on my character later. I actually don't use Facebook anymore. I have an account. I log on every once in a while, right? But I don't use Facebook, and there's a reason for it. Because I used to get in fights with people on Facebook, and over things that don't matter, right? But especially in my old neighborhood, we had like a neighborhood Facebook page. And what I was finding is that people who knew me on Facebook and did not know me in person, they hated me. They hated me because I had strong opinions on things, and they weren't necessarily the popular opinion, you know? And like and I'll give you an example, and you'll see how stupid it is. But when I moved into my house, we were the second house on our street. So it was all new construction. And I came home one day, and there was a house next to mine, and it had the basement done. So it was a cemented basement only, and it had rebar sticking out of it. And when I drove up, there was two kids who were walking along the edge of the cement. So you're talking at least a 10-foot drop onto cement, and they're stepping over metal rebar, right? Now, I, as a parent, thought, look, I'm not tattling on the kids. I didn't go over and tell them to stop. But I posted on the page, I said, look, I don't know whose kids these are. I don't care whose kids these are. This is what they're doing. If I was a parent, I'd want to know, right?
Yeah.
So I got so much hate for posting it. People came at me how dare you, or what, and it was on both sides, right? First, how dare I try to embarrass some kids? I didn't post pictures of them. I didn't know who they were. I didn't describe them. I just said 2 boys this age. That's all I said. And then I also had people on the other side saying, well, why didn't you stop them? Why didn't you do it? It's not my job. I don't know. Their mom may know they're there. It's not my, like, those are not my kids. Yeah. Later in the day, the mother came over to my house and thanked me for posting it because she saw it and she didn't know her kids were doing it. And she had specifically told them not to because she was worried for their safety. And so she thanked me and she said, I didn't want to post on there because there's so much hate, right? So I stopped using Facebook because what happens is that the people who you're trying to make hear your message aren't hearing it. You just end up getting in heated arguments. And I don't want people to know me as the girl who fights with everybody on Facebook, because I would meet people in real life who would be like, wait, you're her? I know who you are from Facebook. Wow, I didn't know you'd be like this. Like, because people would meet me in real life and like me and not understand that, like, you can't judge somebody by 4 sentences on a post.
Yeah.
But, like, I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I couldn't keep out of other people's arguments. I couldn't not give my opinion. And it was a problem. And so I stepped away completely. And, like, for me, like, that, it ties into the Sixth tradition, right? Like, if I'm putting out a representation of myself that's not me, if I'm associating myself with things that don't represent me, then what I'm doing is I'm giving out I'm showing people a person that's not real. And so when people meet me in real life and they're like, that's not how I thought you'd be, you know what I mean? Like, it shows that my message of who I am is being muddied. And so now I don't do that. I stay off of Facebook because I know I can't I just can't keep away from responding to people who I think say stupid things. I can't stop myself. So I just don't engage. But yeah, so I think that for me, like, that's kind of how I would work Tradition 6 in real life. You know, only associating myself with things I want to be associated with.
Love it.
What do you guys think?
Jexi, you are clearly a better person than me because I'm not there yet. Maybe you're more mature or something, but I just dig my heels in and I'm like, nope, we're fighting. This is going to happen. I don't care. Digital war has begun.
You will instigate on Facebook sometimes, David.
Oh, I do. I won't deny that. I won't deny that at all.
See, there's no denial there. I deleted mine. So
yes,
I just have that dummy Facebook
you're better than
right
me
now.
Too, Eric.
Yeah, I just have a dummy Facebook right now. I don't know. I agree with you though. I think a lot of
I can't help it.
What?
I can't help it.
Why can't you help it?
When somebody
you can help it.
It's the very small, like, 1% of Captain America in me. No, when there's a fucking bully, I have to stand up to it. I like, there's no walking away. There's no missing words. And I did this in real life, in like elementary and middle school until I myself then became a bully in high school, which was just horrible. But I was doing a lot of drugs. That's not an excuse. But anyway. No, I would always stand up for the little guy, and I don't take shit. I guess I have a little bit of Chihuahua in me as well, and I'm a barker.
I'm the same way as you in regards to needing to stand up for people, needing to stand up for what's right, and it's funny because, like, my whole life, like, my family still makes fun of me for it, but, like, I love protesting. Like, not just, like, stand on the sign and, like, stand on the street with a sign protesting, but, like, if there's something that's, like, not right, like, I'm the first one to step up and be like, no, we're going to change this, we're going to rally, right? Like, since I've been little. Yeah. But what I found is that when I try to do that on Facebook or an online platform, my personality and my message don't get across in the way that I want them to. And so I stay away from trying to rally online because too much, especially with emotional issues, like things I feel passionate about, I tend to let that passion sound like anger. And it's so easy for me to come off as being bitter or being, when really, like, you guys hear me, like, we've been talking now for months. Like, you see, like, I'm not an angry person, right? Like, I'm not really like a fighter.
Took us by surprise. You're sweet as pie, Jexi.
Oh, thank you. But I'd rather give my message in person, right? Like, I'd rather people see my face and hear my voice when I'm sharing something I'm passionate about, because then people can see that they're seeing passion and not like vengeance, not anger.
Absolutely. All right. I definitely have a question. So what do you think could be or should be done when somebody unaffiliated publicly endorses us? So somebody outside of the groups, maybe it's a person of influence. We'll say that in any realm. So some sort of person of influence endorses us without our knowledge. What could be and should be done about that?
Well, my question, I need a little explanation. Are you talking about somebody who is or is not a member?
Is not a member.
Well, the way that I would handle that, it depends on, obviously, if you can get in touch with the person, depending on their influence level, right? But when anybody endorses us, that's not what we do, right? Like, we don't advertise, we don't promote. Really, the best way to do is reaching out to the person individually if they're super influenced, their marketing team, their press release people, right? And just really kindly letting them know how much we appreciate it and how grateful we are. But that, to keep within our traditions, we ask that they take it down, not say it again, right? And explain and that goes along with like our 11th tradition, right? And explain to them why we don't do that, right? I think so much is about presentation, right? And this happens within our meetings too. So often, like, you have somebody, for example, that says, hey, I'm clean and sober in a meeting, right? And I have heard people stop a meeting to tell them we don't use the word sober. Like, is that really the best way to get your message across? Like, no. Now I've heard, if it were me, I'd say, F you, walk out and never come back. Screw those people, right?
Yeah.
So, but what I do is after the meeting, tell somebody, be like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but you don't actually have to say sober, because when we use the word clean, it actually means that also. We just have one word for everything and explain it, right, in a way that makes it seem like clearly they don't know. We're not upset. We're just teaching, right? And I've done
you're not embarrassing somebody in the middle of a group.
Right. That's the last thing we want to do. And so I think that when it comes to, we have to use that same method, even if it's somebody of influence or an organization or whoever, right? Is first say how grateful we are for them recognizing that Narcotics Anonymous is helpful, right? And how much we appreciate the fact that they're trying to help people and our organization. And clearly we're on the same path, but that we just don't do that publicly, and it violates our traditions. And, we thank you so much, but if you can please not do that in the future, we'd appreciate it. I think that's really the only way to handle it. I think going and saying, like, you shouldn't be doing this, or posting, like, let's say they post something on Twitter and us responding, like, you're not supposed to say that, right? Like, all that does is make us look bad.
Yeah.
I think the best way to do it is private and as kindly as possible, which I imagine if somebody said something like that publicly, too many people would respond to them directly saying, what are you doing?
Yeah, I agree. And along what you said about, like, the clarity statement, one thing that bothers me, and I've seen it so many times, like, somebody, most often a newcomer, like, we do the readings at the beginning of a meeting, and so somebody in the group will be reading who is an addict or whatever, and they'll not say their name. And then somebody in the crowd will be like, what's your name? And, like, completely embarrass them. And, like, it annoys me because I've talked to these people, I come to them after the meeting and I say, they don't have to say their name in any way whatsoever. No. You do not have to announce your identity at all. If they want to keep, and if they want to meeting. Absolutely, and if they want to keep their anonymity that close to the vest, it's none of your fucking business what their name is. You don't have to like stop them in the middle of their reading their stuff, embarrass them, especially if they're a newcomer while they're trying to read a reading that they've never even seen before. Like, right. And I've had to come down on quite a few old timers and be like, it's none of your business what their name is. They might say it, they might not. It's irrelevant. Their name is irrelevant.
So absolutely. I 100% agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm. What you got, Eric? Eric? I was like, Eric? Are you there?
I kind of...
He's glazing over his notes.
No, I kind of want to... You mentioned the difference between clean and sober.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I've actually had people on Twitter like tell me not to use the word clean, and it's such a fellowship thing. And I think if you're not aware of the fellowship thing, that you like, I get why someone in AA would say like, I don't like using the word clean because it implies that I was dirty, and it's like, well, it's a little bit different. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really. That's not really what it means for us and why we feel strongly about it. So, I mean, how do you guys feel about that? Because I think it's something that's an important topic. But, you know, why do you feel like it's important to distinguish between clean and sober?
Can I go first, Jexi?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Me personally, I very much see both sides of the coin. Like she said earlier, like about the clarity statement, like in NA, we say that alcohol is a drug, so therefore sober is implied in us saying clean, because it is a mind and mood altering substance. It is a drug. Therefore, we put it in the clean category. So I understand why there is that clarity, because AA has really like coined, and that's, I don't know, quote unquote, a sacred word to them, like that sober word. So it's very much affiliated with them, that word. And that's how podcast recovery went in the very early stages. We were like, oh, are you in the clean fellowship or the sober fellowship? And it got kind of ridiculous, because it's like, although I understand and see that side of the coin, me personally, I don't care. Like, if you're in a meeting and you say clean and sober, I'm like, okay, it's a word. It's not that big a deal. I understand. I get what they mean. And some people who attend both AA and NA because they like a well-rounded recovery for themselves, so they put them both out there, that's fine. And that's great. I think whatever works. If it's gonna piss some people off, it's really a minor issue in my opinion. But honestly, it could be construed, especially with Tradition 6, as an endorsement of a separate fellowship. So I understand that as well. It can be a gray area, fellowship-wise, and the big picture, I can see how it is a gray area, and a topic of interest and controversy. But for me personally, it isn't. What you got, Jexi?
I'm so excited. I love this topic. So I actually did a video on this. I'm pretty sure I titled it "Why Addicts Don't Use the Word Sober." And, you know, I think you hit a lot of good points. The reason sober, we have to first recognize, means different things in AA versus in NA. So in AA, you're either sober or you're like a dry drunk, right? Sober doesn't mean that you're not drinking. Sober means recovery, right? When you're sober, you're working a program, you're doing something, right? So you can be abstinent and not be sober. if you're in AA, right? NA doesn't hear that word the same. Sober just means you don't drink, right?
Yeah.
So when somebody says they're sober when they're in NA, well, if you're also clean, well, then we know you don't. It's like you're saying, I don't drink and I also don't drink. Like, we don't say, I'm an addict and I'm a heroin addict, or I'm an addict and I used to do meth, right? Like, we don't distinguish between our drugs of choice, so we don't find it different. Yeah. We use clean. And if you think, like, people say, like, oh, it implies I'm dirty. Well, let's be real about when we use those words clean and dirty, we're using them for drug tests, right? You either have clean urine or you have dirty urine. That's how that word's been used for addicts for eternity, since drug tests exist, right? So when you're clean, it means your urine is clean, right? So nobody's saying you were a dirty person. When you're implying that you're clean, if you were using your urine was dirty. Like, we don't say that, but I'm 100% sure that is where those words came from and why we use clean, right? Like, we don't mean clean like now I start showering, though as addicts, many of us do start showering when we first get to recovery for the first time in a while, right? But, the fact is that we use clean to mean that our blood, our urine, is free and clear of all mind and mood altering chemicals, right? Like, that's what we're trying to say. We are free of chemicals. So our blood, our urine is clean. So I think that what's important, when you go to an AA meeting and you say I'm an addict and an alcoholic, you're adding something, right? Because everybody in that room is an alcoholic. And you're saying, hey, but I'm also an addict. In NA, it's unnecessary because when you say I'm an addict, your drug of choice could be alcohol. Your drug of choice could be heroin. We don't care. We don't care what your drug of choice was. We just want to know that you're part of us. And so I think that's why it's different. When you're in AA, you are going to say, I'm an addict and alcoholic. I'm clean and sober, because those words, you're adding something to it. You're saying I didn't just stop drinking. I also stopped using drugs, right? So I think that's where that differentiate, where we differentiate between the words. I agree with you that it is not super important for a regular person sharing to use the correct language, right? Yeah. We don't all walk into any program knowing all the correct terminology, and we shouldn't beat up on people who don't. The only time that I think that the correct language is really important is for the people who are leading the meeting and the people who are like a speaker at a meeting. Because those people, it's automatically implied that a chairperson, a secretary, or the speaker are people who have NA experience and are able to give a clear NA message. If you have the chairperson saying sober, you have the speaker saying sober, it gets very confusing. And so I think in that case, it's important that those people use the right language, because otherwise, how are you giving a clear NA message if you're telling people you got sober, right? Yeah. It's not a clear NA message. It's a recovery message. It's just not clearly Narcotics Anonymous. But for a regular person, I don't care what they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a quick counterpoint. I think really it breaks down to responsible communication. And I really believe that responsible communication takes place one-on-one. I don't think it really takes place in a room full of people, because let's say, just for example, Eric has been with AA for the last 3 years, but he's kind of getting disenfranchised with that fellowship. So he wants to go check out an NA meeting. So he goes to an NA meeting, and the very first time he's announcing himself, he says, "Hi, I'm Eric. I'm a clean or I'm sober, alcoholic, blah blah blah." And somebody spouts out like, "You're in the wrong fellowship." Like, instantly he's gonna be like, "Oh, well, fuck these guys. NA is a bunch of assholes." Like, that is just an improper way to communicate what we're trying to tell that person. So I really think it's all about responsibility of not just what we're saying, but how we're saying it to that person. It's way more palatable
100%.
to wait till after the meeting and go up and talk to Eric and be like, "Hey, I've never seen you before. how are you doing? What's up? You're an alcoholic, and why are you here? Not necessarily why are you here, but like explain the situation a lot better, and ultimately try and befriend that person and meet them where they're at instead of trying to embarrass them in front of a group of people. Because I'm sure all three of us would have been like, "Fuck this place, I'm out." At least
absolutely. Absolutely, and I think you're 100% right. One-on-one communication is so important with anything that you think that someone needs to know.
Yep. What you got, Eric? What do you got, Jexi? Do you have any questions or points you want to bring up?
Oh gosh, I wasn't prepared for you to throw back at me.
Yes.
All right, let's see. How about what? If you could change, I know it's not quite Tradition 6, but since we're kind of talking about other things, if you could change one thing about the NA program, what would it be?
Oh, I think I know what Eric's going to say. You go first, Eric.
You go first. I have to think about this.
Okay. Can I say what I think?
Yeah, you can say you can say what
I think I know what
What am I going to say?
I think you're going to say remove the word God.
Maybe.
And say strictly higher power. I think that's where you're maybe just first off, but I think you're going for a deep cut now. What would I change? I think I would change sort of the cross the cross-platform, not necessarily promotion, but at least recognition. And I think, and I think this for all fellowships, I think they should be more cohesive to let people know how many avenues there really are available. Because, like, let's be honest, Celebrate Recovery is not for everybody. Smart Recovery is not for everybody. NA, AA, Refuge Recovery, none of these are a one-size-fits-all recovery. And I think somebody who has no knowledge of these, if they get sort of thrust into one or the other from a rehab or a halfway house or something, and it's like, oh, well, we only send you to AA meetings. And I understand not everything's available everywhere, but I think all fellowships should at least have not necessarily a working knowledge, but a contact number, and be more open to finding what works for that person instead of trying to make that person fit to that specific fellowship, and really meet people where they're at. Like, if you know somebody, like somebody's coming in with like a Buddhist t-shirt and like they're like clearly super Eastern philosophy type person, you're like, hey, there's a Buddhist recovery fellowship. Like, maybe saying God all the time, maybe that's not where you're at here in NA or in saying Jesus and Celebrate Recovery, or maybe you're not really with the whole science thing. So check out this Buddhist recovery. So I would say just a more cohesive family unit of all recovery, and not really being afraid of one another or feel like we're in competition with each other. And because I've always felt that. I've always felt there's just at least some semblance of animosity, at least between AA and NA. And I don't believe in it. I don't take part in it. And if somebody's more comfortable in AA, I'm like, fucking great. If somebody's more comfortable in Smart Recovery, I'm like, good for you. Whatever works for you, that's what's most important, because I think that's going to be your most successful bid at recovery. So that would be me.
Well,
what about you?
I like that.
I do like your that's pretty good.
I'm a Unitarian recovery.
God, man. I really do influence you, don't I? So I've
grown.
You have grown. I'm very proud of you, David.
Thank you.
I'm serious. I'm serious about that.
I know you are, and it does mean a lot.
The God thing, you're right. That probably is the first gut reaction. Remove the word God, and just do higher power. I think language is very important, and it can fuck people up. Mm-hmm. But I am going to go deep cut, because this is something I have been talking about. I think there needs to be more emphasis, and I know this does kind of counter our primary. The one part 100% doesn't counter our primary purpose. Okay. But the second part of this, we'll just focus on the first part, so we won't even get into like the more life-based stuff. But I think there should be more of a focus on getting your body back as well, because we always talk about recovering mind, body, like emotions, spirit, but we never really talk about the body.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
There's not a nutrition section in the step working guide.
Well,
maybe there should be.
There's no like exercise. There's not like eating right. There's no like this is a regimen you should consider. Maybe you should do yoga. Maybe yoga's not right for you. Like maybe you should do this. It is always about like mental health, addiction, spirituality, and we do talk about the body as like, we have to like get our body right. But I don't know, if someone's going to the diner after the meeting and eating a Salisbury steak with mashed potatoes and a milkshake, and then they get like a slice of apple pie and a coffee, that's not treating your body right. And like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, for once in a while, sure. It's like we all have like a vice, and like we all let loose every once in a while, but I don't believe there's enough emphasis on taking care of ourselves, because it's like we only get one body. I mean, unless, things change, we can get two later on, which I'm all for, upgrading like parts. But
I'm thinking about getting robot legs.
No, I'm totally game. Like if I can like replace
it's a risky operation, but it'll be worth it.
If I can start replacing my organs with like, just like
Cyborg Eric could live forever.
I'm aware of that. I'm here for it. That's all I'm saying. I'm here for it. I don't know if I'm gonna be here for it as far as like time goes, but here for that. You get to choose when you shut down. What? But I don't know. I just think it's crazy that we can be treating our bodies so badly, and then when the moment we're like, oh, we're not doing drugs anymore, our bodies are great, and it's like, oh, I just replaced the drugs with like eating McDonald's 2 times a day and drinking like 3 energy drinks, and it's like, are you really like how? I mean, yeah, and you know what else? And this is more of like probably AA than NA. I don't really see this at NA as much, and I am going to call the fellowship on this one. Donuts, is that a healthy alternative to breakfast? I mean, I get that donuts are good, and, given my diet, I rarely can eat a donut. It is one of the foods I really, really, really miss. But I don't believe...
I ate 3 today.
That's awesome.
Sorry.
I wish I don't
What's
think
your favorite donut, Eric?
Just simple glazed, man. Just a glazed donut.
Okay. What about you, Jexi?
I like glazed. I like chocolate frosted, but I can't keep Enemans donuts, the chocolate ones in my house. I had 3 of the mini ones today. I can't. I'll eat the whole box. I don't really eat that much. But if you put a box of Enemans donuts in front of me, I can't help myself.
What is it about that chocolate? Brewers. That chocolate is so good.
I don't know. It's so good.
Oh God.
But I totally agree with you though about the physical health thing. I never really considered that, but you're 100% right. Like we, as a program, we put so much on like emotional, spiritual well-being, and like, we don't focus on physical well-being at all. I think that's a really good point.
We literally just say body and then that's it. That's as far as we go. It's like mind, body, and spirit. Yeah. And then we talk about mind and spirit, and don't address the body at all. And that's pretty much, we just glaze over it. And they're like, we said body, it's cool.
We said it. Oh, you stopped doing drugs, so everything must be okay. And it's like, well, no. I mean, people are still, not treating their body as well as they should be. Like, you know what I mean? And
and in the really practical, like, if you come into, if you've been a heroin user intravenous for many years, and then you come into recovery and you don't see a doctor for 5 years, and then all of a sudden you do, and it's like, oh, you have AIDS or you have hepatitis, like, that you haven't been taken care of. Like, yeah, you're clean and everything's great, but now you have an incurable disease. Like, those things, those AIDS and hepatitis are very real, and they exist. And especially for intravenous drug users, they are very real. And so, like, we should say that more in NA. It's like, go to the doctor, like, especially in early recovery. Well, like, go get checked out and make sure everything's okay. Like, if you've been smoking crack for the last 12 years, maybe see a cardiologist. Your heart might be fucked up, buddy.
Well, yeah, I mean, you should take care of that stuff. Like, and I understand insurance is, if you don't have insurance, it's a lot harder, right? But if you have insurance, you have no fucking excuse. Like, make your regular visits, like, go to the dentist twice a year. Like, if you can't see well, I don't know, figure it the fuck out. Go see an eye doctor. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't... Yeah. Just hoping that it'll go away and not addressing it, that's just going back to, like, the root of the problem.
Right. Personal responsibility, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I can go into the whole life thing as well, but I'm not going to do that. We've talked about that one day.
I asked you guys the question without thinking that I would have an answer, right? But, like, as you guys are talking, like, I think it's actually a really good question to have, because, like, each of you thought of something completely different, and, like, my thoughts would be or my answer would be completely different from both of those, although I agree with it all.
What is your answer?
I would make two changes, actually, like, thinking about it. Is one, I would change the way that we address medications in recovery, both maintenance medications and any medication, right? Like, medication as a whole. I do think they're making that change. It's obviously delayed with everything that happened, but the mental illness IP that's in the works of being printed, I think is going to do a good job with that. But I think we do too much, because we say complete abstinence, I think we do too much shaming people who are on medication. And the more, and we've talked about this, but the more that science and medicine shows that medications for a lot of people are helpful, like, I don't think that we should make people feel like outsiders for choosing that route. And the other change that I would make is really more practical than, like, an actual change, is how we consider carrying the message. I think that a lot of what we talk about when we talk about bad experiences with people and stuff, it's always about how people say things, not what they say. And I think that so often we see people in the program fight over things to the point where things don't get done, or we're like, if you read the public relations handbook that's on the World's website, there's a spot in there that says, when in doubt, throw all the traditions out the window as long as you're carrying the message. Like, if your choice is to carry the message or violate a tradition, you carry the message, right? Like, you carry the message above all else. And I think that sometimes that gets lost. I've seen people argue over, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't pay for the table at the fair because it's violating this or that, right? Or maybe we shouldn't do a PSA letting people know that Narcotics Anonymous is in our town because, that's violating this or that, right? So often we allow anonymity to, I think, to get confused with confidentiality. Like, we're not a confidential program, right? We're just personally anonymous. And I think that so often we let our misinterpretation of tradition keep us from carrying the message in a productive way. And that's why I'm so passionate about the traditions, because I've seen people take them and twist them. Like, for example, I got an email last week. Like, as you guys know, I have a YouTube channel. For anybody listening who doesn't know, I have a YouTube channel that's based on my personal experience in recovery. I have a couple of videos where I talk about my experience with NA, or like I have a video on like what to expect at an NA meeting, right? Like I have a couple informative videos in that way, but my channel is not based on Narcotics Anonymous. My channel is just based on recovery as a whole, right? But I got an email last week from a guy who said that I was violating the 11th tradition by having my face on camera. And, I wrote back to him, and I also addressed it on my channel, because I said, I'm not violating any traditions. My channel is not about Narcotics Anonymous. Like, my channel is just my personal experience in recovery. Like, yes, sometimes I talk about Narcotics Anonymous, but I am very clear in those videos when I'm giving information, sharing like what, some things that you can expect at an NA meeting, that I'm just giving my personal perspective as a person, and that I'm just a member. I don't represent anybody. These are just my thoughts. Like, I am not a representative of the program. You should not take what I say as like, the end all be all of facts, and I do that very clearly. But I thought it was funny. I'm thinking, here I am having one of the few, because there are some other recovery-based YouTube channels, but they're few and far between in comparison to other topic channels. And none of them are large. And I'm like, here I am trying to let people know that they're not alone in recovery, right? Like, that there's people out there who are doing it, and getting an email that says like, you could do this, but you shouldn't show your face because it's violating traditions. Now, I explained my perspective. He was a very nice guy. He wasn't being nasty or anything, but my thought is we shouldn't be letting traditions keep us from sharing our recovery. Like, that's what we're supposed to be doing. And like, I can understand his perspective, and that's just one example, but I've seen so many times people's understanding of traditions be a way to prevent them from sharing the message of recovery. And there's so many people out there who need a program like ours, who don't know it's here, who don't know how to find it, who are lost. And if we don't share about it, how are they ever going to find it?
Yeah.
But I don't know. No. That's just my thought.
And I think all three of ours can be combined into one. And I think the one thing we would like to see is a greater willingness to change and grow and evolve as a fellowship. Yeah. Because I think the more we evolve and stay cognitive and vigilant of what's going on around us, we're better suited to basically talk to the audience in a more effective way. And like,
I agree.
I'm going to avoid throwing some shade at another fellowship, but that'll be what I say.
Wait, I have one more thing. One quick thing. Fun change that I have been, and I actually thought about doing this at a meeting a while ago, but this is just a fun change. I want to add 3 new key tags. This is something I actually researched on how to make our own key tags for the specific home group, which I then know we probably go rogue at that point. But I just feel very strongly there should be a 4-month key tag, a 5-month key tag, and a 5-year key tag. And that's just me.
Oh.
That's me. Because I think that's, you see a lot of people go out between that stretch of 90 and 6 months. And I think some people do come back just for the key tags. And I think at 6 months to 9 months, they're going to be a little bit more welcoming, like, to the idea of like, I have to wait 3 months because now like they already have 7 key tags.
Right.
And 5, I think it should be brown, just so it can be like, because you've been through some shit. And that's my whole thing on why there should be a 5-year key tag. But I
love it.
Strongly feel there should be 3 more key tags. But that's just me.
I can see that. I can totally get behind that. I think that, 90 days is a really long time. I think 30, 60, 90 days are the hardest key tags to get by far. And 90 days to 6 months, that's doing it all over again. That's double the time.
Yep, you have to double your time. It's one of 2 times.
A long time.
Yeah. Well, no, from 30 to 60, you're doubling your time. And then 90 to 6 months. Yeah.
So because 90 days to 6 months is another 90 days,
Yeah.
It's still hard. I think it's a lot for someone with 3 months. And people do really like the key tags. I mean, I like key tags. You know what I mean? I don't come back for them anymore, and I don't know, but I felt proud getting them in the beginning. And
absolutely. Standing up and having people clap.
Hell yeah.
So, I don't know.
We are humans, and we are fallible and vain, and we like getting free shit. Especially that a freebie is always welcome. All right. Cool. Well, I think we are about out of time. So we would like to thank our ever gracious, ever amazing UFC fighting Jexi back onto the podcast. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you guys again. I'm always so honored to be here. Thank you.
And where can everyone find you, Jexi?
You guys can find me on YouTube. My channel name is According to Jexi. I'd love to have you. I have a Twitter account and Instagram too, but YouTube is the best way to find me.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another stimulating and educational episode of, oh my God, I forgot the name of it. Oh, The Meeting After the Meeting. If you like what you hear, please help Eric and I keep going with podcast recovery and donate whatever you can to our Venmo, our PayPal, our Patreon, just so we can get some better equipment and keep podcast recovery on the air, because we love this. And we do a lot of work, especially Eric. He does a lot of hard work, and he deserves his recognition. But most importantly, everybody, if you need to find us, go check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube channel. For any more information about Eric, Carly, Allie, or myself, go to podcastrecovery.com. But most importantly, everybody out there, stay safe and stay clean.